All right, Greg, the bye week is come and gone. We can use all the cliches about hitting the reset button and taking a cleansing breath and all of that. But the fact of the matter is this team has an opportunity now, and let's talk about the headlines, and let's start with Trey Bryant. That's the biggest headline. He had surgery on Tuesday, and, of course, he is done for the year.
Yeah, it's really a shame because we saw a glimpse in games 1 and 2, and boy, did we like what we saw, what he can be. And hopefully this surgery on his knee can get him back to being a back that can, I think, compete at a pretty high level in the Big Ten Conference. The good news is he did not redshirt a year ago, so he certainly has the easy option for the redshirt. You could even maybe, if you wanted to, think about a sixth year for him going down the road. I don't know if we'll ever get to that point, but you definitely know you still have, he'll be a sophomore eligibility-wise next season when he comes back. So that's the good news. And, now it's up to Zigbo and Wilbon and maybe a little Jalen Bradley here for the final 5 games.
And speaking of injuries, a bit of a revolving door. You've got guys coming back, and you've got guys out again going into the Purdue game.
Yeah, the week off certainly helped. It helped heal up a J.D. Spillman, who I don't think would have played if we had to play last week. He got slammed to the turf late in the Buckeyes game. Stanley Morgan has certainly had some issues, but I think he's good to go. So on the offensive side, I like where we sit defensively. The good news is on the back end, where the safeties are going to be healthy. Aaron Williams is going to be able to play in this game. Antonio Reed's going to be able to play in this game. It sounds like Joshua Kalu can play. The negative is Luke Gifford is going to be out. And, man, you talk about a young guy that's maybe been the MVP of that defense. It's been Luke Gifford. And so the Huskers will have to play this game tomorrow without number 12, who's done such a great job. And as you and I have talked in the past, maybe has benefited the most from making the switch to the 3-4 defense.
So as you watch this team practice this week, did you notice anything different? Is there a different vibe coming out of this team, or is it same old, same old?
I think the coaches have always talked about how they like the way this team practices and their attitude and going. That's not been an issue. Taking things from the practice field and implementing those in the game, that's been the issue. So, no, I think the players are anxious to get back out there and play. Sometimes they say, you don't want to sit on a bad loss for a long time. Well, in this case, maybe they just needed to completely wipe the memory banks a little bit, and hopefully that's happened, and they get ready for the stretch run. And there certainly isn't Ohio State that we're lining up to play this week in Purdue. I'm not taking a lot away from them, but they're just not. They're not that caliber of an athlete. Our guys know that, and I think that's helped them their prep getting ready for this game.
When you look at Nebraska as the 98th rushing team in the country, Greg, that is so far from the norm for a Big Red team. But then you consider the lopsided scores of some of the games and the necessity to have to pass the majority of the time. How much of that is lack of execution, and how much of that is just lack of opportunity?
Isn't that interesting that they rank that, and yet in 5 of the 7 games they've had a rusher go over 100 yards.
Yeah.
So that stat baffles me a little bit, because Zigbo had that good run of 100-yard games. Trey Bryant, who we talked about earlier, his first 2 and only games, he was over 100 in both those games. So to me, it seems a little misleading. But I think your point is well taken. They got so far behind, particularly in the Ohio State game and the Oregon game to a certain degree, where they really had to just start throwing the football a lot. So to me, sometimes numbers are really accurate. Sometimes they're a little deceiving. To me, that one's a little deceiving, because I think in a lot of games, Nebraska's had a fairly effective run game.
So this is the flip side of the schedule now, because we started out with 5 of the first 7 at home, and now the flip side is 3 of the last 5 on the road, and it starts tomorrow night in Purdue and less than pristine conditions at kickoff tomorrow night in West Lafayette.
It's going to be chilly. That's football weather, though, right? That's what they'll say. That's Big Ten football weather. That's what we grew up watching. It'll be chilly. To me, the whole key is 2 keys. Is there precipitation? There's none on the forecast. And is there a lot of wind? And there's not a lot of wind in the forecast. So you take those 2 things out, football players can adapt. I mean, they can deal with 38, 36 degrees, whatever it's going to be at kickoff tomorrow night, if you don't have those other 2 elements. So I don't know that it's going to have a huge impact on the game. Once the guys start hitting and popping and going, I don't know that it's going to be that bad of a deal. Purdue really pushed for this night kickoff. They installed over the summer permanent lighting, and so they wanted to use it a few times. And they circled this game of the Big Ten Conference months ago going, we would really like that game to be a night game. And so they got their wish. This is a night game. They might be regretting that decision a little bit now that the weather has turned so cold for their fans. And in some ways, Jeff, that might benefit Nebraska, because they might lose 4,000 or 5,000 fans who might have come in an afternoon game with the sun out, instead going, oh, I'm not going to go sit out there and freeze. So that might hurt their crowd a little bit in the end of this thing. So, and maybe that's just me searching for some more positives to throw in here. But, if you're a fan, do you want to go sit out in 35-degree weather and watch a couple of 3 and 4 teams? I'm not sure I would do that.
All right, let's talk about the Boilermakers. Certainly a better team than they were last year, although you can argue the bar was pretty low for that. The defense is better, although they're really not getting to the quarterback. Only 7 sacks so far this year, which means Tanner Lee should have some time to throw the football tomorrow night.
Yeah, I would think so. The turnaround for Purdue, and I think they've done an amazing job. I thought Jeff Brom was a great hire for the Boilermakers. And then when you watch these guys put their staff together, that's the key to me. I mean, when guys get announced and have their press conference, that's the big splash, right? Mm-hmm. Then I look for the underlying things. Who do they bring with them, or who do they put on their staff? He hired Nick Holt as his defensive coordinator. We last saw Nick Holt when he was at Washington with the Huskies, and he was the DC for Steve Sarkisian. I think he's a tremendous guy. They have cut their points allowed in half from last year to this year. That's their market difference, is they've been able to stop some people. Last week against Rutgers, they had 9 3-and-outs against the Scarlet Knights. The last 4 possessions for Rutgers, all 3-and-outs for a negative 12 yards. I'm not sure how they lost a football game.
Yeah, they forced 12 punts.
Right, forced a bunch of punts.
Yeah.
They lost a football game because they turned the ball over a couple times, and they had a lot of penalties. That's what cost them the football game. But their defense played very, very well. You're right, they haven't necessarily got to the quarterback a lot, but they're pretty sound. I love their linebackers. In fact, in my preseason grades, I had them as one of the better linebacking units in the conference. They're really good. Bentley and Bailey are very good players for them on the middle tier of their defense, and their defensive line's not bad. So they're going to make Nebraska work to get some things going. I hope that Danny Langsdorff brings his patience card and says, we're going to run the football quite a bit in this game. One, it's cold, but 2, if we can kind of just keep pounding away at them, I think Nebraska can have some success moving the ball and ultimately scoring points.
And in the secondary, they have been good despite not getting to the quarterback up front. They've had 5 picks in the last 3 games. And so, again, Tanner Lee early on has had pick problems, but just 1 interception in the last 14 quarters. And so we'll see what that matchup holds.
Yeah, I think Tanner's kind of locked it in a little bit. And you're right. That's one of the reasons Purdue has gotten better defensively, is they've been forcing turnovers. And that's a gift. I mean, I wish Nebraska was a little bit better on that end of it right now, forcing mistakes by the other team. So Purdue has gotten a little bit of a mindset of, we're going to be a defense that gets takeaways from you. Nebraska has to avoid that tomorrow night. The worst thing would be is having those nice drives, which we've certainly seen, that end in a turnover. That's what's just a backbreaker for teams and offenses. Nebraska has to avoid that pitfall tomorrow.
Purdue has been very, very frustrating offensively for their fans. You mentioned the 474 yards against Rutgers, but only scoring 12 points. They've scored just 1 touchdown in their last 8 quarters, just 5 in 16 quarters of Big Ten play, and they really haven't figured out the quarterback situation because they've had injuries and they've had inconsistency there.
Yeah, it's musical chairs. David Blau and Sindelar, 2 guys who individually look okay. I'm a Blau fan.
Yeah.
I've liked him since he stepped on campus there, but he's made some big mistakes. I remember watching them in their last home game, which was a couple of weeks ago against the Gophers, which they won after about a 90-minute weather delay. In the first half of that game, they had 2 impressive drives that ended with end zone interceptions thrown by Blau, and that's been the problem. He's moved the team more, but he's been more susceptible to turnovers, although you look at Sindelar's numbers, he's thrown picks as well. Sindelar played the entire Rutgers game. They have said, we know who we're starting. We're not telling anybody, so we're not sure which one. I kind of think we might see both tomorrow night. Mm-hmm. It's made who gets the hot hand. Jeff Brom, former quarterback himself, terrific player in Louisville, and he's kind of the offensive genius of this group. He really demands a lot of high production out of that position. I think he just has a feel. Okay, I think this guy may match up better with this defense, or this guy I think we can have more success with. So we'll see who he trots out there tomorrow night. Nebraska's had to prepare for both. A little bit different skill set between the two, but they still run the basic same offense.
And the uncertainty kind of extends into their receiving core and their tight ends as well. This is a group that's really struggled. Lots of drops for that group this year.
Yeah, they are. And I think there's some talent there. Herdman's a pretty good tight end for them. They've got another young freshman that they've been getting the football to. Pretty average wide receivers in my eyes when I look at that. That should be somebody that Chris Jones ought to be able to match up with and lock down a little bit for Nebraska. I don't see Purdue scoring a bunch of points in this game. I really don't. Now, I think they're playing well enough defensively that they can make this a fairly low-scoring game. But I'll be surprised if Purdue has a huge productive game offensively against the Black Shirts.
They do have a couple of guys in Worship and in Knox that average more than 5 yards a carry. They're missing Fuller, who's missed the last 4. So they have some guys, when they get the football, can actually pick up some yardage.
You named the name that's the X factor in this game that maybe hasn't been talked really about all week, and that's Fuller. He is expected back for this game. He's missed 4. He's still the leading rusher on the team, even though he's missed 4 of the 7 games. But they think he'll be back. He dressed for Rutgers last week, warmed up, didn't play. I'm getting indications from West Lafayette he will definitely play. And not only is he a threat to run the football, but they like to get him the ball in space in the passing game as well. That could be a good, big X factor in this game with Fuller coming back for Purdue.
And this is a Nebraska defense that needs some confidence. I mean, let's talk about a team that gave up 10 straight touchdown drives in those 2 big losses and are only 110th in the nation in getting to the quarterback.
You just sucker punch me with that right there. That's hard to believe, right?
It is.
10 straight possessions ending in scores. Oh man, unbelievable! It was really hard to watch that game, and people kept going. Can Nebraska change something up? Well, let's also credit the Buckeyes a little bit. I mean, that was pretty darn good execution where they just didn't make mistakes. And every time they needed to make a play, their senior quarterback, J.T. Barrett, did it for them. But, boy, you go back into really after the Oregon game, we really thought that Bob Diaco's defense, and they were making nice strides. Even in the loss to Northern Illinois, that wasn't on the defense. That was on the offense with the 2 pick sixes. Then they played well against Rutgers, played well against Illinois. I thought played really well for about 3 quarters against Wisconsin before they kind of wore down with that big, heavy running attack. And then came the Ohio State game. The good news is this isn't Ohio State on the schedule tomorrow night. This is Purdue.
And really, as you look at the rest of the schedule, and I mean, you say winnable games with a grain of salt considering what's happened this year, but with the exception of the Penn State game, you're talking about winnable games the rest of the way.
Absolutely. 5 to go, 4 extremely winnable, toss-up type games like this one is as well. So I think that there's some light at the end of the tunnel here. Going to Penn State, absolutely. It's going to be really, really hard. That's one of the top 5 teams in the country right now, as were Ohio State and Wisconsin. That's just really hard. That's life in the Big Ten. But the other 4 games, starting with this Purdue game tomorrow night, certainly winnable for Nebraska if Nebraska can play to their potential. And we haven't seen this team really do that for long stretches of play throughout the season. That's the challenge for the coaching staff and these players. Play to your potential and play at long stretches to your potential. If you do that, some wins are going to start coming.